Professor Chris Nwaokobia is the convener of CountryFirst, and we're going to be having a topical discussion weeks after ordering the removal from office of Okoye Obonu-Obla, the former chairman of the Special Presidential Investigation Panel for the Recovery of Public Property. President Muhammadu Buhari just yesterday dissolved the body and ordered a probe into its activities. This dissolution represents one of the president's apparently latest attempts at striking out in a different direction, signaling a clear departure from the ultra-conservative approach that dominated governance in Nigeria for the past 4.5 years. But how deep will President Buhari allow these latest actions to run? Will he be tempted to micromanage and keep hold of the essential ingredients of control? Or what about the noise after restructuring as well? For answers to all of this now, we do have our guest seated in Abuja, Professor Chris Nwaokobia. Welcome to the program.
Chris, good morning.
Pleasure to be here.
Good morning. Welcome again to the morning show.
Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning, and thank you. Thank you for
my profound pleasure,
obliging us all the time. But, I mean, Leila has, outlined a number of issues. But, I would like us to start with, some other topical issues that I consider, urgent. I would like to have your views on the xenophobic attacks in South Africa, how the Nigerian government has managed the crisis, the response of the South African government, and also the response from, Nigerians as a community of citizens who chose to stand up for their country.
Let me say first that we repudiate every and all acts of violence. I do sincerely repudiate every act of violence. And then xenophobia, if you like, or Afrophobia in South Africa is reprehensible. And indeed, a large segment of the Nigerian society has said that, has criticized it, and we are saying repeatedly that South Africa is extremely ungrateful for what Nigeria did regarding the years of apartheid and the funds that were spent. We took in Nelson Mandela at some point in Nigeria. We had Oliver Tambo here. We had Thabo Mbeki here, and to pay us back the way they're doing, it's terrible, it's reprehensible. But let me say here that even those who, as it were attacking Nigerians in South Africa, in the build-up, in the diplomatic build-up or response, if you like, or reaction to the action in South Africa, even the South African government appeared to be to have been more serious and strident. They even shut down the embassy here. They called back when we reacted. And in one of my write-ups regarding that action, I condemned the reprisals here. But what do we do when our Foreign Affairs Minister would say that they are in the process of recalling? The Minister of Information would say they are in the process. Of course, unfortunately, government has shown us repeatedly that the life of the Nigerian people is almost as cheap as a tomato in the marketplace, because Nigerians are really not condemning in the strictest terms the bloodletting across this country. And Dr. Ruben, let me say this, that sometimes we expect people to prize the Nigerian life more than our government and this system prizes the Nigerian life. And that is why, unfortunately, as you and I talk, it is not only xenophobia in South Africa. Across the world, people are beginning to treat Nigerians with some level of disrespect, and they are beginning to make the lives of the average Nigerian out there in the diaspora troublesome, tumultuous, and uncomfortable. And that is because our government has not been very strong in our diplomatic reaction to several of such issues. And I say this advisedly. What would it have cost us when it just started to call back our High Commissioner to South Africa? What would it have cost us to have closed down the embassy and then issued very strong statement? But what we had here was that our president was sending a special envoy who took about 4 days to get to South Africa. South Africa is just about 6 hours from here. And I think that the time has come for this country to begin to put proper premium on human lives. And when we begin to do that, it is a popular parlance that we grew up with. Charity begins at home. When you begin to treat the lives of the average Nigerian person with primacy, when you show that the life of the Nigerian individual matters, then the world will treat us as such. The lame argument about Nigerians being involved in crime doesn't hold water for three reasons. Dr. Ruben, I hear people say that the 419 or wire fraud is a Nigerian scam. Nigeria is not even among the top 20 online scam countries. But we allow such things to stick. Not up to 1% of Nigerians are involved in the crimes that they label us with. And tragically, leadership in this country allows that profiling. The Ministry of Information, in releasing statements, will talk about Nigerians in drug, Nigerians in one crime or the other, rather than talking about the primacy of the Nigerian life. I want to say that until we begin to deal with such profiling, until we begin to speak strongly in support and in defense of the Nigerian life, the Nigerian persona, the world will not take us seriously. That's exactly what is happening.
Well, negative profiling is certainly an issue that we have been facing for quite a strong amount of time, so I understand what you were saying there. What is your take on the response of the South African government as well? President Ramaphosa sending envoys to 6 African countries, including Nigeria. Do you think that the way in which we responded to that through our Office of the President was well met? I mean, it seemed to stick to the level of diplomacy that we've been seeing. Did you want to see a stronger upper hand? Did you want to see certain conditions being given to South Africa on behalf of Nigeria? Or do you agree with the president on the stern yet diplomatic approach that is continuously being taken to the xenophobic attacks in South Africa?
Well, I want to say that the beautiful side of the reaction of government is that they're still talking about the need for compensation. I think that Nigerians who have lost business and lost homes in South Africa must be compensated, and government must pursue that seriously, not in terms of platitudes or like our president will say, we will help South Africa. No, the issues are very strong. You're talking about lives and properties, and the Nigerian government must strongly address these issues. I want to say that I welcome and I salute the apology from the South African government. Of course, that is what is expected when such things happen. And then I don't know whether you are aware that their economy, since these xenophobic attacks began, is dwindling, and they're beginning to feel the heat. I think that the time has come for those who should pretend this nation to begin to, like I said, put strong primacy on human lives. We must, the Nigerian life must matter, whether it be in Zamfara, in Katsina, in Borno State, whether in South Africa, whether in Greece, wherever it is, the Nigerian life must matter, and government must show the way in strongly condemning threats to Nigerian lives, whether at home or abroad.
Well, quite correct, but let's talk about another issue. I mean, yesterday it was announced that President Buhari has set up an Economic Advisory Council, which is supposed to replace the National Economic Management Team. And the president himself will be meeting with this Economic Advisory Committee on a regular basis, on a monthly basis, or is it quarterly basis? You know, and we have technocrats, experts, you know, as members of this particular committee. What do you think should be the main priorities? Because the whole interest of many Nigerians is about getting the economy to perform at a better rate. What priorities, what kind of advice do you think that that committee should be giving the federal government, and what should they, you know, prioritize as things to do to move the economy forward and ensure growth and development at a faster rate?
Let me quickly say that when I read the release, the names are beautiful names. We know them as experts in the economic sector and the economic field. But Dr. Ruben, there is one issue that troubles and bothers the carapace of my mind, which is first, what is a Nigerian economic dream? What is a Nigerian agenda what do we intend to achieve? I've heard Mr. President say that they want to create 100 million jobs in 10 years. Some say they want to create 10 million jobs between now and 2023. There are several statements. We don't have. Ghana will tell you that their vision is to industrialize Ghana and ensure that every county, every local government has a company that is employing Ghanaians. And they are working on that. They've cut down their VAT for industrial sector development. And what are we doing? Dr. Ruben, on the one hand, they have told us that there's a new Economic Advisory Council. On the other hand, just before the new economic advice, they've told us that they are raising VAT, increasing VAT from 5% to 7.5%. Is that what they are going to grapple with? I think that government and governance and economic growth should not be something you just rush into. There should be a programmatic. That's point number one. Number two, Dr. Ruben, let me say this, that as you and I talk, the Constitution provides that the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria is the head of the Economic Council of Government. And now the language of a press statement from the Villa regarding the Economic Council that will be reporting regularly to the President is that that council would have direct access to the President. And then you ask yourself, that's why we've been seeing a lot of mimicking and mockery and cartoons and all kinds of satiric writings on the social media where they're beginning to say that the office of the Vice President is being rendered redundant and if you like, that our Vice President is losing relevance. But for me, it is not about the politics of it. It is about our country. My question is, so if an economic council reports directly to the President, what happens to the economic team that is supposed to be superintended, headed, and marshaled by the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria? And that's for the ruling party and Mr. President to grapple with. What is important, and which is the third leg of my my approach to this situation, is that in which, of course, is the direct answer to what this Economic Council must attend. First, job creation. You can't talk about growing an economy without thinking about growing jobs, and then they must work in tandem with the private sector to grow our economy. There is something that bothers me deeply when we talk about food sufficiency on the one hand, and I don't know whether you are aware, Doctor, that the price of a bag of locally produced rice is over 20,000 naira. And so, on the one hand, we're talking about food sufficiency, we're banning importation of rice. On the other hand, the bag of locally grown rice is almost at par. The price is almost at par with the foreign foreign rice. And so, you ask yourself, like I said initially, what is the agenda of government in growing the economy? What is the proactive, there should be time premiums. There should be a programmatic with respect to some of these things. You just don't rush into the situation, into the arena, and ban certain things, and then make life more difficult for the Nigerian people. And then in desperate effort to shore up resources, you're saying that you will increase VAT. There is a mishmash of ideas and a confused economic sector. I hope that, and I pray that the new Economic Council, Advisory Council, will be able to look at these issues. Because first, the average Nigerian needs to understand. We want to know what the economic policy of government is. We want to know what this government indeed wants to achieve. If you're talking about food sufficiency, how are you pursuing it? How are you going to pursue it? And then I've always said, and this is clearly my approach to situations now, because, Dr. Ruben, I'm coming personally to you now. When you left the Villa, you wrote a piece that is very instructive, but Nigerians overlooked it, about what goes on in the Villa. and if you allow me to paraphrase, what is that demon? What is that spirit that causes confusion, disease of the mind, disease of thought, disease of the body at the seat of power? Because it's fundamentally what we must grapple with first. Every year we're complaining about the same thing. We've been doing the same analysis and analogies since 1999, and we're still where we are. The electoral process, instead of getting better, has gotten worse. In 2019, February, March, we conducted the worst election in the history of our democratic voyage.
We have certainly
As you and I talk, we're back to
number of these topical issues. Sorry, for the sake of time, let's look at a different case as well, the Okoye-Obona-Obla case as well, and the dissolution of the presidential panel on the recovery of public property. Firstly, what is your take on the case? And secondly, with the dissolution of this panel, do you think that we're going to be looking at a situation where the president is going to put forward a new panel like he did with the new Economic Advisory Council that he has? Or is this a job that's going to be sent in the direction of AMCON? What do you think? What do you think this is going to play out to be?
Let me quickly say that I was almost preempting that question when I started with what goes on in the villa, what happens to leadership in our country. And I say without fear of querulous critics, that if you were to know Obona-Obla personally, you will understand that he has fire in his bones. He's one young man who committedly believes that corruption must be killed in this country. But now, you watch how he went about his job, and you see several, and if you like, a lot of allegations, a lot of accusations as to how less than proper his superintendence of that department of the Public Property Recovery and Investigation Panel was. And you ask yourself, how did the fighter, the one who was totally opposed to corruption, how did he end up getting corrupt? And then you come back to the villa, the same government that told us consistently that it will fight corruption. The records are clear. We are aware that several individuals who were otherwise on trial and on investigation for corruption are sitting today at the federal cabinet. So what is wrong with us? That's on the one hand. Now, regarding I saw the press release about the president asking for reports on disbanding the panel, the committee, and all that. And then the first thing I'll say is corruption winning? Are they fighting corruption? And then to what extent is the investigation? Where is it going to lead us? And that brings us back to the fundamentals. This country must address issues of nationhood. It is not just about picking the same issue here. Tomorrow we're going to get back to it if we don't address the fundamentals. And I'll tell you quickly that we must come back to the foundation and the structure of this country. There's something about Nigeria, there's something about our structure and our foundation that allows corruption. There's something about our structure and our foundation that corrupts the public officer. There's something about our system that messes up everything about governance. And that is why consistently, since 1970, permit my use of, consistently, every successive administration has been scored lower than the government before it. And as you and I talk, some of us were opposed to the Jonathan presidency in 2014, 2015, and criticized that administration heavily. But today, it is obvious that if you meet, and this is beyond political sentiments, if you go out to the streets and ask Nigerians, even the APC irredentist will say that Jonathan's administration was more frontal in the fight against corruption than the present. That is how bad it has become. And then you ask yourself, what is wrong with our system? Why do we consistently move 2 steps forward and 10 steps backward? And these are fundamentally the issues that we must begin to address. Because if we don't, if you constitute another panel, another committee, another investigation panel, they will be corrupted. Look at the man who is in charge of EFCC. Up till today, he's still there. We have security reports that says that he's been operating at less than proper protocols. That he's been doing things.
Chris,
even the DSS has reports against him, but he's still there.
Chris, if I may
so I think that we must address these issues and do the needful.
Chris, if I may interject here, look, there is a point you made earlier on that I would like to take you back to. And that was when you asked the question, what is the economic agenda? You know, do you think it is fair to say that this government does not have an economic agenda? If you look at the fact that we have in place an economic recovery and growth plan, which is properly articulated, the document is there. We have the National Industrial Growth Plan. We have also the 2020 to 2022 freestyle framework and strategy. You know, all of these initiatives. You know, and then, of course, on the monetary side, you also have Godwin Emefiele having made the attempt to articulate a 5-year plan. You know, all this, you know, in my view, will constitute, the definition of a clear agenda in terms of what government wants to achieve. But I don't know what you think. We'll take a break in a matter of, 1 minute. But, what do you say about the proposal that I've raised?
No, quickly, Dr. Ruben, you have just defined what I was saying. What is our national agenda? You've talked about 5 different plans. Go around the world. Every country will tell you the vision of Dubai was industrialization for so and so period. You are grappling with several issues without a programmatic. Why? How do we? Because whatever growth plan you must, it must start from the educational sector. How are you going to, what is the short-term, the mid-term, and the long-term vision? What do we want to achieve? This same government is telling you about several economic empowerment programs. On the one hand, they're telling you it's about agriculture. On the other, it's a cacophony of ideas. We do not know what the immediate vision of this government is. They must come straight to from the CBN to the banks to the private sector. We must understand what our vision is. If you go to the streets in Ghana and you ask a young man, what is the vision of the Ghanaian state? They will tell you. I do not know exactly what this government is pursuing, and I do not know what Dr. Bismarck Rewane and his men will be advising this government on. And I think this government must come clear to us as to what is vision. That's actually, when you go to the Ministry of Youth and Sports, they're telling you about growing talents. And interestingly, just yesterday, which is salutary, Sunday Dare, the minister, went to the Ministry of Education to talk about youth sports and growing that sector from schools. But if you go to the Ministry of Trade and Investment, they'll tell you this is our growth plan. You go to the Ministry of Finance, they tell you a different thing. You go to the Ministry of Budget and Planning, they tell you a different thing. You go to the Vice President's office, they tell you something that is more like a mishmash of this. I think that the time has come for government to understand that this country needs urgent surgical reappraisal. And it must begin from our educational curriculum. No, if you're telling Nigerians about a growth plan that does not have anything to do with our curriculum, let's talk about from the tertiary level. Let's not be too ambitious at this level, but I do sincerely think that it is right to aim for the stars. This government must go and rework our educational curriculum. It is unfortunate that we have engineers who cannot make nuts using steel from our Jakarta. It's unfortunate that our energy sector is comatose. And you cannot, Dr. Ruben, you cannot tell me clearly what is the vision for reworking our power sector in the next 1 year. Nobody can tell me that. And that is how bad it has become. And political irredentists and partisans will continue to tell me it's about PDP, APC. There's something about Nigeria that is wrong fundamentally. And we must do the needful before anything can work. It's alleged that at some point in our history, in this democracy, $16 billion was spent on power. We don't have power. Since this administration came in 2015, we still don't have power, and monies have been spent. You know, these are questions that we must continue to grapple with as a people. It is not about partisanship. This government must go down to go back to the drawing board, understand and couch a national recovery agenda, an economic agenda that will take this country out of the woods. This fire brigade approach, they come and tell us it is this today, tomorrow they'll tell us it's food survival, tomorrow they tell us it's sufficiency, they tell us no, come on. This country is too big for the fire brigade approach to issues about power, about economy, about youth employment, about development.
Certainly,
we
Professor.
Must sit
Certainly
down.
we
and
are.
I hope
we are pushing on a fire brigade approach to quite a number of things. One of those things being also the recent closure of our border between here and the Republic of Benin. No, Professor, I'd like us to be a bit more optimistic than that. But the recent closure of our border between Nigeria and the Republic of Benin, this has come as a shock to a lot of people who didn't expect the government to react like this. And now we're also hearing that the border may be closed for even longer than the 28 days initially proposed. What is your take on a situation like this that clearly has more liabilities than assets and clearly is not really the way forward?
Like I said, and thank God you understand exactly where I'm coming from. You wake up as a Nigerian, the next second you're told that you can't come into Nigeria from Benin Republic because the immigration service is doing something. No. Governance is a servant. All over the world, people hold leadership responsible. You must inform Nigerians about your actions, about certain programmatic of government, and carry them along. That way it becomes successful. But unfortunately, people just wake up. It's a fire brigade approach in just about everything in this country, and that has to change. But I tell you, this country needs a deep surgical rework, and it has to come from the foundation. Except the foundation is reworked, we'll continue to dance in circles. And I do sincerely believe and I pray that those who are listening, those who are at the level of leadership, will begin to grapple with this truth. It is not about PDP, APC. Our children are looking at us, and they are asking strong questions. Why is it that Benin Republic is doing well? Why is it that Benin Republic has a very functional wharf, and a country of over 200 million people depends on only Tinkan and Apapa Wharf? What sense does it make? How is it that in Nigeria, the federal government celebrates payment of salaries? What is the responsibility of government? State governments are telling you how they paid salaries and how they haven't paid salaries, and the fundamental issues for which government exists is left unattended. Nigeria, there's bloodletting and bloodshed everywhere, and when you hear that 2 persons died at so and so location, it doesn't mean anything anymore. And the likes of John Donne would mourn in their grave because that inimitable words of his, the death of one man diminishes me because I'm involved in mankind. Do not ask of me for who the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. Nobody cares about lives anymore. Every day you read in the newspapers that 7 persons have been killed in Kaduna, 12 persons in Katsina, 10 in Niger, 2 in Delta. And it's just like life goes on. And there is something wrong with this country, seriously wrong, that we must begin to grapple with. And that's exactly why when I write, I've consistently said that we must do the needful. And government must investigate what the needful is. Because save and except we do what is proper, right and right now, we'll come back to the issues about, it may not be just closing the borders tomorrow. It may just be closing down the airports. And Nigerians are stranded everywhere because it's a fire brigade programmatic to just about everything about state. And those who defend, who speak on behalf of government, will consistently sloganize, will consistently use propaganda rather than issues that affect the masses of our people. The time to come straight to government with the truth is now. This country does indeed need a massive overhaul and a rework. And this government must sit down, ask questions, investigate these issues, and grapple with it.
Professor Nwaokobia, if I may play the devil's advocate, without necessarily turning myself into a spokesperson for this administration. One standard view, in Abuja is that, look, many of these problems were not created by the Buhari administration. They are inherited problems, and perhaps considering the depth of those problems, it will take time. You talked about education. Education is on the concurrent list. It's not just the federal government that should worry about taking a look at the curriculum. Then you talked about the power sector. I mean, in recent times, the government has been talking about taking a second look at the framework for electricity supply, particularly with regard to the GENCOs and the DISCOs. And to increase generation and transmission, there is a plan in place to engage Siemens and to ensure that there is improvement between now and maybe 2025. Those are some of the things, on a positive note, you may disagree, but these are facts. But when you talk about reworking the foundation of Nigeria, what exactly do you mean? Are you asking for restructuring?
Let me say this. The reason I use the word rework is because every so often when you talk about restructuring, people begin to look at it from partisan embers, and they fire their shots from partisan comfort zones. But let me say this, Dr. Ruben. Why is the federal government of Nigeria involved almost exclusively in power? Why is it the federal government of Nigeria that is licensing GENCOs and DISCOs? Why are the states not generating power? Why can't you just allow them control their resources and generate power? Dr. Ruben, I grew up in a town called Saple. Saple has a thermal generating facility. Saple can generate enough power to cover the whole of Delta State. But you know what? There is a certain national grid. Dr. Ruben, you can generate power from waste, from wind, from solar. Why are we unwilling to unbundle this enterprise? That's point number one. Then with education, what is the national program? At some point we had 6-5-4 programmatic.
6-3-3-4.
Then came 6-3-3. Now what is the national agenda? It has failed in growing entrepreneurs and growing system. So what have we done thus far to rework it? You don't need 10 years to begin the journey of progress. If you continue like this government has always done, you keep your eyes on the reverse gear, you're blaming the past and unable to grapple with the realities now, then we'll continue to have the same problems. I think that the time has come for us. That's why I use the word rework. If you allow the states control, some of the states are generating power at some level. Let the states run some of these things. We must do the needful, Dr. Ruben Abati. The federal government has too much to chew. I'll give you another practical instance. If every state government is in charge of the federal government roads that traverses each sector, each territory, do you know that we will have better roads in this country? I remember that as bad, quote unquote, as the Buhari administration was, most of the federal roads around and within Delta State was fixed by his administration. Lagos and Ogun State are asking to do that now, and some other states. If you allow states control their resources and fix these roads, you will have better road networks. I don't understand why the Nigerian estate and those who politic with everything cannot grapple with this reality. Dr. Ruben, until the needful is done, 10 magicians cannot fix this estate. The federal government's too meddlesome, too cumbersome, too big. The behemoth is too unwieldy that it cannot perform. And that's exactly where we are. Bring 10 economic programs. If you do not devolve power to the local governments, to the states before you get to the federal government, we'll continue to fail. That is why you're talking about states not being able to pay salaries. Let me give you a practical instance. Some people will come out and tell you that some states cannot function without bailouts and support from the federal government.
Thank you very much, Professor Chris Nwaokobia. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, so we cannot continue the conversation. Thank you very much, sir.